Hi Stampers, this is Lisa with Queen Bee Creations, here with another Facebook Live. Last week somebody said they wanted to learn how to mask, so that's what we're doing today. We're going to make this beautiful hibiscus card, and this is from a stamp set called Timeless Tropic, and then these are the matching dies that go with it. We're going to be working on masking, and so we're going to make this card here, and it is done with the Timeless Tropical stamp set, and there are coordinating framelits that go with it. Now, I'm not necessarily using the framelits today, but I'm going to show you a way that you can, because the way we normally mask things is we would stamp our layer, which in this case is this hibiscus, and then we would come in with, we would stamp on a Post-it note, and then we would take this Post-it note piece and we would place it over the top and then stamp the leaves or whatever you want to come out from behind afterwards. Now this Post-it note has a little bit of temporary adhesive and it doesn't mess up the image, which is why we use the Post-it note kind of glue so that it removes easily. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that one, and I'll show you. We would just take our stamps. Now I've got this, garden green, or old olive, sorry. The first one was done in garden green. This time I'm doing old olive. And so I stamped what I wanted in the foreground because I want the hibiscus to be in the front. That's what I stamped first. Then I'm going to cover it up, and then I'm going to come in with my leaves that I want to be poking out from behind, and I'm going to stamp those over the top of this little Post-it note. Let's see if I want another one or not. Okay. So then when I remove the Post-it note, the leaves are coming from behind. So hopefully that answers the question of the person who said they wanted to learn how to do this. But we just stamp the image, color it in the way we want, cover it with the Post-it note that we have fussy cut, and then stamp the leaves and remove the Post-it note. The reason I said that I would show you how you could use the framelits is because these items have a framelit that coordinates with it. You don't necessarily need to die cut or fussy cut the image because you can die cut it and use that as your mask as well. The only thing I want to say is you may have a little more of a gap along the edge because the framelit gives you a white border around your image. Now on this one, it probably wouldn't make much difference because we're going to go back in and we're going to color this with Stampin' Blends, and so it'll cover up any kind of white frame that you had around this. So that's an option. You can also use the leaf. If you wanted to have more come out from behind, you would cover up these with the Post-it note, and then you would stamp again. And so that leaf would appear that it's coming out from behind the other one. So do you see how that works? Now, this is after I colored it in, but I wanted to show you one other thing. Is I had taken and tried what we call masking fluid. So I happened to have some masking fluid on hand, and what I did was I just opened this up. Now, you want to kind of just not really shake it, but just tilt it a little bit to make sure it is blended, but don't shake because I shook this 2 hours ago and it's still got little bubbles in it, so we don't want bubbles. That's not ideal. But you would just take and use a paintbrush, hopefully one you don't care about because it does get kind of mucked up because it's kind of a rubber adhesive kind of feel, and see, it'll kind of like pull off. So you don't want to use a good paintbrush for this, or you want to dip it into water first, or maybe even dish soap to kind of mask the bristles so that they don't get destroyed. Or you can do like I've done and just keep one brush dedicated for working with masking fluid. But what you would do is you would just dip it into the bottle and get the brush wet, and then you would come along and just paint over your image with this masking fluid. Now you only want to do one coat because if you were to do multiple coats, there's a tendency that it would I don't know, not like it and pull a little bit when you go to remove it. But you don't want it so thin that it's hard to remove either. So just kind of give it a coat. Some even have a color to them, which I might advise. I got the stuff that's clear, but some of the ones I was watching on the internet had used a one that was yellow, so that it went on yellow, and then when it dried clear, it was okay to pull it off or stamp over it. But see, that's just got a kind of shiny coat, and you can see that one still looks pretty wet. This one that I did a while ago is still shiny, but it no longer looks wet. And so what you would do then is you would just come along and you would stamp your leaves. And then you want to be sure that they are good and dry, because I did find that when I tried to take off the masking fluid before the ink dried, it, I don't know, it rubbed and made green on my flower, and that's not what I wanted. Now, normally you can just move this with your fingers and just see how it's starting to roll off. And see, it's like I said, remember rubber cement? Remember using that in school way back when? That's what it kind of looks like as it's coming off. Now you can, like I said, you can use your fingers, or because mine are very inky, maybe I don't want to be using my fingers, you can come in with this adhesive remover, and this will lift it off very easily as well. So see what I mean? It wasn't, the ink wasn't quite dry, and so that's why it gave me a little bit of green there. But that's using masking fluid. That's another option. Again, don't use a good brush, and don't let it sit on there for too long. Again, if you let it sit on the paper for like 3 hours, it's going to be more difficult to come off. You don't want to do more than one coat, and before you pull it off, it's best to make sure that your ink that you stamped over the top is totally dry. So to finish off this card, I'm going to come in with the Stampin' Blends. As I said, we're going to color in the leaves. Then when I colored the flower, as you can see in the first one, I mean, it's pretty, it's okay. And I covered it with some Wink of Stella. And I've used, there was a light pumpkin pie, and I used the Daffodil Delight light and dark and the Mango Melody light and dark. This time I just used the Mango Melody light and dark, and then I took a sponge dauber to the center of the flower, and I used Calypso Coral to add a little bit of extra color to the inside. And see, this is where I was saying, if you used the framelits to cut your mask, because I'm coming in close to the flower with my Stampin' Blends, I don't think you would see that edge. You would not see that the leaves don't quite come to the flower. But there's that. And I'm stamping on a piece of cardstock. This is Whisper White, and it is 3 3/4 by 5, because then I'm going to come in with my card base, which is 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4. We'll burnish that with the bone folder. I'm going to cover that with a piece that is of old olive that is 4 inches by 5 1/4, which makes this 3 3/4 by 5. Oh, which it's not. So I'm just going to trim that down. I have a lot of these pre-cut pieces of cardstock. I have an entire drawer over there where I have cut a whole pack of Whisper White into 4 inches by 5 1/4, because that's the most common size that I use. And it's easy for me to trim down if I want something smaller, but I like having a pre-cut stack. I mean, this is just a part of it, but I mean, I've got a bunch ready to go. So if I'm making cards for a swap, or when I did my Christmas cards, preparing for a class, I like having a lot of layers pre-cut. Oh, and then I'm going to come in and stamp our sentiment for the outside. This is May Your Birthday Be Memorable. And this is also from this Timeless Tropical stamp set. And then I can put that on flat, or we can pop it up on dimensionals. So there's our top layer. And I just put this one on dimensionals. The first one I did was flat. You can go either way. It depends on whether or not you want it popped up. Be careful when you are popping up layers that I only usually go one layer of dimensionals because I want it to be able to fit through the mail. And I find if I put more than one layer of Stampin' Dimensionals, it gets a little too thick to go through the mail. I want to be able to have my card in its envelope and be able to feed it through the part of my trimmer to let us know that it's okay to go through the mail without requiring extra postage. So then I'm going to take another layer. This is another one of those pre-cut layers I had in my drawer. So 4 inches by 5 1/4. And then I'm going to take my inside sentiment and stamp that right in the middle. And then I had the palm trees. Now I love palm trees, but I couldn't figure out, do I stamp this in green? Do I stamp it in brown? You know, how do I go about this? So I go back to my handy dandy markers. Now these are our standard markers, so if you have these, don't, you know, and you get the new Stampin' Blends and you go, oh my gosh, they color so much better, don't get rid of them, because I use them all the time to apply ink to my stamps, because obviously palm trees are 2 colors. You know, I do this a lot with flowers, you know, anything that you want dual color or, you know, more than one color. I even do it sometimes with sentiments. If I want a certain word to pop out of a sentiment, I will create it in a different color by just taking the brush tip of my Stampin' Write markers and rubbing it against the back of the stamp. And then I'm going to take my second color. So that was Old Olive, and this is Soft Suede. Now sometimes it takes us a little while to do the coloring and make sure we have ink everywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to huff on it. And what that does is it kind of re-wets the ink. It takes the moisture from my breath and wets the ink once again. And then there you have it. I have my palm trees in 2 different colors. So there you go. There's how you mask off a flower. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. I hope to see you back next Monday for another Facebook Live. Thanks for joining me. Bye.